this idea that's floating around right now that what's happening in Ukraine is ultimately the United States' fault. If you listen to some academics, some geopoliticians, I mentioned John Mersheimer earlier, the realist school of foreign affairs people, they're saying, look, the West stuck its nose in what was going on over there. Ukraine's not in our backyard, it's in their backyard. We flipped the government so that it was not pro-Russian, it was pro-American, pro-Western, and now this is what we've gotten. Putin was ticked off about it. He tried to signal. He pushed back in 99 when NATO started expanding. He pushed back in 2000 and I think 4 or 5 when it expanded again. He pushed back again in 2009 when it expanded. And finally, when we flipped the government there, it was just too much to bear, and he went and took Crimea. So, I mean, do you guys think, is the United States actually responsible, or let's draw a wider circle, is the West in general responsible for what's happening there now?
I think the West plays a big role. I mean, to understand this conflict, you have to understand why Putin is invading Ukraine. Putin didn't just wake up one morning and decide, I'm going to go kill a bunch of innocent civilians in Ukraine and take over the country.
Yeah.
He's ultimately trying to protect the sovereignty of his nation, right? Not that what he's doing is good. I don't want to sound like I'm pro-Putin or pro-Russia, but he's ultimately trying to protect the sovereignty of his nation, just like we would in the United States with our borders. And so I think that the West encroaching on Russia with the EU, the United States, NATO, Putin feels threatened by that. I mean, he's at odds with nearly all the countries that border him to the I'm trying to think of a map of Russia to the west. And he's alarmed by that. So I think that the West is partially responsible. I mean, we installed a president in Ukraine that is not pro-Russia. So I think the U.S. and the West bear some responsibility that we should recognize. And to understand why Putin is doing what he's doing, you have to recognize the West's role in this conflict, because we are at least partially responsible.
So Mearsheimer says the first round of NATO enlargement took place in 99. That's when the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland came in. The second was 2004. That was Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia. It says Moscow complained bitterly from the start. During NATO's 95 bombing campaign against the Bosnian Serbs, Boris Yeltsin said, "This is the first sign of what could happen when NATO comes right up to the Russian Federation's borders. The flames of war could burst out across the whole of Europe." Fast forward, one Russian newspaper reported, let's see here, this is when we were looking at, this would have been in the mid-2000s when we were looking at bringing in Georgia and Ukraine. One Russian paper reported Putin telling Bush, saying about a discussion between Putin and Bush, Putin, quote, very transparently hinted that if Ukraine were accepted into NATO, it would cease to exist.
Why are we surprised at what's happening?
Why are we surprised at what was happening, at what is happening? That's it. And so the realist school, their take on all of this is that, look, this has been coming. How in the world was this a surprise to anyone? The West acted so surprised, so caught off guard when Putin had over and over said, look, this is not okay. Starting with Boris Yeltsin warning, this is not a good idea, guys. And when an alcoholic Boris Yeltsin warns you about something, you should listen. It said, look, this is not a good idea, and we ignored it. And I think when we think about expanding NATO, we're thinking about Western ideas of freedom and security, and why would Russia? We have no intention of invading Russia, and we don't have any intention of invading Russia. However, we have pro-democracy organizations working in Ukraine like crazy, trying to make them more Western, and the Russians have got to be sitting there thinking, well, if they do that to them, eventually are they going to try to do that to us? So if you're Vladimir Putin and you're sitting there thinking, okay, I've pitched a fit over this, they overthrew the guy I had in power at the country next door to me, then they turned the government against me. Well, okay, let's send them a message. We're going to go take Crimea. When just, 6 years before that, they had messed with Georgia and South Ossetia and oh gosh, I can't remember the third region's name, but Putin's got to be thinking, I've told you, I've telegraphed you, how many invasions do I need to make, small invasions, before you get the idea? I don't want this in my backyard.
Yeah. I believe there was discussion at one point before Russia took Crimea
Abkhazia.
of them building a NATO naval base on Crimea.
Yes.
Which would have been very alarming to Putin. So, I mean, like we're saying, to understand this conflict, you have to understand where Putin is coming from. That's just something I cannot stress enough. I feel like so much of that is being missed in Western thought. This surprise that Putin is invading Ukraine and this idea that he's just doing it to kill. Like, we need to understand our role now. We got to take some responsibility. That's
Well,
just
honestly,
the biggest thing I can stress.
I don't understand why the United States has been so intent on installing this more Western
Right.
democracy in Ukraine. Like,
Why
what?
are we involved in
I don't
Eastern
even
Europe?
understand what's in it for the United States, really, other than we think our way of government is the best,
Yeah.
and I believe that. So, like, if other countries have that, I'm sure that's good. But, like, is it really worth pissing off Putin because we want to make Ukraine more of a democracy? I don't think that is a really good trade for the United States to invest in.
It's like, look what we've done now. Look what we've done.
Yeah.
Look at what
Yeah.
it results in. It results in a thug invading another country. Is this what we wanted?
Yeah.